We're glad you're here today. Vision Sunday is an opportunity for us to celebrate what has been and anticipate what's coming. And it's not too often that I get up and I feel like I've got something that I can't wait to preach, but I've got this verse that I've been sitting on for months that I've been saving for today. Like I almost have let it out several times, but I've been holding it for today. Can't wait to preach this verse. Joshua 3 verse 15 says this, now the Jordan is at flood stage all during harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The people crossed over opposite Jericho. Joshua in this text was a newly appointed leader. Moses had been the leader of the Israelites. He had led them out of captivity in Egypt. He had led them for 40 some years. But now he died and Joshua became the new guy. And 40 years before this exact moment, the nation of Israel stood in this exact spot, looked across at the same exact land with the generational promise from God of a land flowing with milk and honey echoing in their hearts. They were right there on the water's edge. They were right there looking at the promise. They were on the edge of the promise, but they did not step in. They didn't step in. But this time, things are different. This time, they didn't just stare out across the water. This time, they didn't wait for the situation to change and think, well, maybe it'll be more favorable if we come back later. This time, they didn't just sit back and hope that something would happen. This time, they went for it. And as soon as their feet touched the water's edge, as soon as they stepped in, as soon as they got their feet wet, the water stopped flowing. As soon as they got their feet wet, you got to get your feet wet. Get your feet wet. Come on, turn to somebody and say, get your feet wet. In the Southwest campus, turn to somebody, say, get your feet wet. Get your feet wet. To get your feet wet is to begin to participate in an activity or to try something new. And for the Israelites, the old ways were not working. They had tried things. They had tried complaining. Turns out complaining doesn't move your life forward. They had tried going back into the life that they used to live. Turns out that won't satisfy you. They had tried doing their own thing and ignoring God, but that just gets you walking in circles. They tried watching, but that's not faith, and spectating and speculating, but that's not faith either. But when they decided to get their feet wet, the water stopped. As soon as the priests stepped in, the flow of the water stopped. As soon as they stepped in the direction of God's promise, a miracle happened. It was a step. See, faith is not a feeling. Faith is not a declaration. You can't just say faith. Faith is not good intentions. It's not an idea. It's not a desire. Faith is action. Faith is obedience in the direction of God's promise, confident in God's character. Obedience in the direction of God's promise, while I've got confidence in God's character. See, God never asks for obedience without a promise attached. It's never like, just because I said so. Everything that God asks us to do, every call of obedience that he puts in front of us has a promise on the other end of it that if I would honor God in this way, if I would obey God in this way, it's going to go well for me in that way. There's always a promise attached to obedience. That's why in our relationships, when we make the decision, I'm going to do it God's way, it's because there are promises around intimacy and promises around fulfillment and promises to protect your heart and give you peace in the area of relationship. If I'm obedient, there's a promise. That's why he calls us to obedience in our finances. If I do money God's way, then there's a promise that the world of the generous grows larger and larger, but the world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. There's a promise that if I do it God's way, when I give, it'll be given back to me, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. There's a promise that if we're obedient, God will open heaven and bless your life in ways that you've never even imagined, because there's always a promise where there's a call to obedience. Get your feet wet. It is obedience in the direction of God's promise and confidence in his character. Now, full disclosure, feet are disgusting. I don't really know why I need to disclose that. You know that. You have feet. They're probably the worst part of you. Very few people are like, man, my feet are my finest feature. Now, some of you are, and that freaks the rest of us out. But here's the thing. I almost didn't even bring up the idea of getting your feet wet because I didn't want us to be sitting here thinking about feet. I didn't. You've got to have lunch later. I'm not setting you up for success if you're thinking about feet all morning. We almost called this whole series Get Your Feet Wet, but then I thought, well, there'd probably have to be a foot on the screen behind me for the next 8 to 10 weeks, and that would just be a distraction. We don't need that. I worried that if we talked about feet too much, you all would get really comfortable with your foot issues. You start trying to come and find me after the service and say, would you lay hands on my bunion? Would you lay hands on my corn? Would you pray for my crushed arch or whatever it is that's happening there? I've got a fungus. Listen, I've got faith for you to be healed. It's going to happen from a distance for me, though. You're going to have to find somebody else who wants to touch your feet, probably a doctor. You got to get paid to do that. The truth is, we would not be here today if there hadn't been people over and over and over and over again in the last 12 years who said, I'm going to get my feet wet and do something I've never done. I'm going to say yes to participate. I'm going to be involved, who have taken steps of obedience in the direction of a promise, confident in the character of God. We're here because people have chosen to get their feet wet. 13 years ago, Natasha and I moved to Calgary with our family. At that time, it was just the Fab Four. We've added a couple others since then. But we didn't wait to move until there was a church to lead. We didn't wait to move until there were people to be friends with. We didn't wait to move until there was money in the bank account. We didn't wait until it felt good or we had a building to meet in. Listen, it was terrifying. Here's a little secret. It's always terrifying. But it was a step of obedience in the direction of a promise, confident in the character of our God. On September 23rd, 2012, 37 people, 37 adults were that group that we had convinced that, hey, let's take a step of obedience toward the promise of God together. Let's trust his character and his goodness. Let's do this and let's have a church service and believe for something wild to happen. Thank you to the 37 who got their feet. Some of you are in the room who got your feet wet on that very first Sunday. Listen, on our very first Easter, we got our feet wet. We sat around and said, hey, we're going to empty the entire bank account to advertise for our Easter service, hoping, listen, and the bank account then was not what it is now. We thought we're going to empty the whole thing with the hopes that maybe a neighbor, maybe a coworker, maybe a friend, maybe a family member will come to church and have their life changed by Jesus. We got our feet wet. In 2016, we rented the Jack Singer Concert Hall for the very first time. The church was not the size of the Jack Singer Concert Hall, but we thought maybe if we get our feet wet and make this investment, more people than we could fit in a regular service will show up to this Easter service and their lives will be changed and transformed. The church was only 4 years old, but we got our feet wet. We've taken steps. We've acquired office spaces, launched campuses, done different crazy, wild things. There have been so many steps. And we've been stepping ever since. And from that very first Sunday on September 23rd, 2012, what happened is that original group that took a step, got their feet wet, was 4. Then there was 37 who got their feet wet. On that very first Sunday, we asked a room of 150 people, hey, would you get your feet wet with us? Would we try something together we've never done before? And every fall, every year, more people sitting where you're sitting today have had their hearts stirred towards a vision that's bigger than them and have made the decision with us to say, yeah, listen, it doesn't matter to me whether this is your first Sunday, your second Sunday, your third Sunday, or you're an OG. What matters is that you're in the room, and we all have the opportunity today to say, I'm going to take a step of obedience towards a promise of God. I'm confident in his character. I'll get my feet wet. At the beginning of our 10th year, which was the start of, which was in 2021, we realized that EC needed to have a dream. We were growing up. We had to mature. We had to dream a little bit bigger than 1 year at a time. God was asking us then to shift from thinking year to year to building something over the course of a decade that would last 100 years. A vision that was big enough to reach the world, but specific enough to empower the individual, full of faith, but impossible in our own strength. We needed to start planning, thinking, and dreaming generationally. Out of that was a rally cry or a prophetic declaration we pulled from Psalm 27, verse 13, which simply says, I remain confident of this, that I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And it has been that promise, that idea, that has really navigated and directed our steps these last few years. Confident that as long as we're breathing, we will see the goodness of the Lord. That as long as we're here, we might as well anticipate and expect and live for the goodness of the Lord in our families, in our homes, in our marriages, in our businesses, in our church, in our city, our nation, and beyond. And so Vision Sunday is like this alignment moment around the reason we exist as a church, but also as believers, where we are here to create space so people far from God can find hope in Jesus, have their lives change. We'll do everything we can so everyone can come to Christ. And it's not really about one vision day. It's about living legacy lives. It's making decisions today that will have an eternal impact. And so our this season for us kicks off every year on this Sunday, and it'll go for the next couple of months. We're going to get built up in our faith together. It'll culminate on November 24th. We'll take a sacrificial offering in the direction of God's promises, believing, confident in his character, and we'll invest in the future. But before we get there, we got to talk about where we are today. Where are we today and where are we going? So the next couple of minutes are going to feel a little bit more like a TED Talk than a sermon or a message, but it's important to celebrate, let you in on some of the big things that have happened because of your life in the last year. Because sometimes you don't even realize what you're a part of. You might think that, well, I'm a part of that church and I show up on Sunday and it's all fine and good and I feel good about myself and then I leave. But no, you're a part of something a lot bigger than just a 75-minute service on a Sunday. We're having eternal impact. So at EC, we organize ourselves around these 4 key areas. There's our world, our nation, our city, and our church. So I'm going to start and give you a little highlight reel of what's happened and what is about to happen globally because of you. Are you ready? You don't sound ready. You ready? Are you ready? Man, I bet the Southwest was a lot readier, but that's okay. It's not a competition, but it's a little bit of a competition. Okay, our world. From the very beginning, we've always felt a specific call to what is known as the 1040 window. Nations that make up 2/3 of the world's population, 95% of which have not heard the message of Jesus, 87% who live on less than $1 a day. One of our initiatives is in Southeast Asia, where we support a full-time missionary on the ground. As part of the Association of Related Churches in that region, we have launched 181 new churches this year. Whoa. Listen, I love you. If you clap after everything, we're going to be here till dinner, okay? So I'll give you a heads up. I'll say, okay, let's clap now. Okay, so that's good. I love the enthusiasm. 8 churches are currently being built. We're doing that. 375 people have been freed from slavery. 300 of those have given their life to Jesus and are plugged into churches that we're supporting. And through Legacy last year, we began to provide clean water for 1,500 families in Southeast Asia. Come on, that's amazing. I didn't say clap. Just because I get excited doesn't mean you. Okay. We're going to step into something new. This year we got faith. We're funding 2 new schools on land we've already purchased. And we're going to distribute 3,600 audio Bibles to people so they can hear, learn, and study the scripture in their own language. That's amazing, but not amazing enough for a clap just yet. In India, we are so grateful for David Punamanil, and he's part of our church family and the whole team at Lighthouse Voyage. This past year, we were able to help sponsor 10 girls who had been saved from trafficking, graduated now university in the last year. We completed a renovation on the Lighthouse Voyage Boys Home. We got 4 girls and 2 boys rescued from slavery. And as we move ahead into this year, they're launching a driving school, a mechanic school, and a nursing school program so that these women that are getting saved out of trafficking are going to be educated and then put back into the marketplace, making a valuable contribution to their city and their world. Come on, that is exciting. We're almost at the cheer spot. In Zimbabwe in 2021, we built a church building with a toilet. That might not seem like much for you, but there was basically one toilet in Sally Mugabe, and everybody would keep going to this one house. And so when we built the church, people were like, I'm going to go to church because I need to use the washroom. It's a great strategy, everybody. And so that church has grown, and now a school was started. And out of the school we started this past year, there was 120 students. And along with providing supplies and relationship to the students, we stepped out in faith and we paid for 4 full-time teachers to be on the ground teaching in Zimbabwe. In Mexico in June, we sent 30 people, our largest international mission team yet, to the Doors of Faith Orphanage, provided programming and support to the 80 children and staff on site. Also fed and served hundreds of people at a mission in Tijuana. Our team invested in the kids, but also took on practical jobs, repairing maintenance work, doing things around the orphanage to give them a better future. Come on, give it up for what's happening globally because of you. It's amazing. It's like, this is what makes it so crazy, is none of us could do all of that by ourselves. But it's the collective sacrifice. It's all of us saying, yeah, I'll get my feet wet. Yeah, why not start schools in Southeast Asia and India and Zimbabwe? Let's do it. Our nation, Natasha and I, along with our team here at EC, give leadership to a church planting organization in Canada called the Association of Related Churches. ARC, as we refer to it, is not just Canadian, it's actually a global movement that provides training, coaching, mentorship, relationship, and startup capital for people to launch churches around the world. This is pretty cool, but you launch a church around the world every 4 to 7 days. Every 4 to 7 days, you start a new church. And Natasha and I were in England last weekend, and it was an ARC global gathering. We were there, had the opportunity to teach and preach and encourage church planters from Ireland, England, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Italy, France, and some other places I'm sure I'm forgetting. But it's just an incredible reach that you're having globally. Since EC started 12 years ago, we've planted 24 churches in Canada, including last Sunday, Greatness Church in Ottawa, where they had 211 in attendance. 7 people gave their lives to Christ on that first day. Man, that is incredible. As we look ahead to this year, we're going to continue to train church planters. We trained 26 in February. We're training more the first week of October. We're running events across the country to bring pastors and leaders together and launching churches in Regina, Saskatchewan, and Merritt, BC. I love what's going on nationally. Nationally, we also continue to grow our relationship with Indigenous communities. And for the past 2 years, EC has provided a graduation ceremony for the Stony Nakota kindergarten students and their families. It's the most beautiful thing to see us out there with bouncy castles and a barbecue and loving on those families. We also have sent, now multiple years in a row, mission teams to Fort Chipewyan, Alberta, way up in the north, where our teams have run VBSs, led community outreaches, doing maintenance work, repairs on facilities, and strengthening what is a growing Christian population in that area. We love Canada. We're going to continue to love Canada, and I'm so grateful for the impact you are having across the country. That's a good time to make some noise because it's pretty amazing. Okay, our city. We love Calgary. Can I just encourage you? If you live here, love it. And there's always something we can complain about. There's always something we can be frustrated about. I didn't water my grass legally all summer either. But listen, that doesn't mean I watered it illegally. I'm just saying, if you're here, love it. We love YYC. That was an initiative that started here at EC in 2013. And since then, our yellow shirts have been taking over the city and loving on Calgary ever since. And Calgary Housing is our largest local partner. We love the opportunity to serve and encourage families who live in these neighborhoods. And the city has given us tremendous favor and open doors. This year, we added the neighborhood of Deer Run and are now serving 21.5% of all Calgary Housing residents annually. That's more than 5,000 people that you are reaching in the city because you love them. Serve Day is a highlight for us every summer. In 2024, we more than doubled our serve projects. We had 31 different projects going, hundreds of people working, yellow shirting, spreading the love of Jesus. You were changing oil, running block parties, doing community cleanup projects, basketball tournaments, working on yards, renovating, doing home improvements. I mean, it is incredible to see what happens when we all work together. And you know what's amazing is out of Serve Day, we have people, many families that are now in our church, have been baptized, love Jesus, are serving and giving back. Just last month, through our back to school backpack initiative, we more than doubled our backpack contribution because of a legacy donation from somebody in our church. We gave out 360 backpacks with lunch kits, water bottles, headphones to kids who couldn't afford them. Friends, we at the events where we were giving them out, we did 40 haircuts. That's amazing. Some dude walked into school with a fresh backpack and a fresh fade because you're generous. I love it. Brown Bagging for Calgary Kids is an organization that provides lunch for kids that don't have food at school. Last year, we served 5,351 lunches, but this year, the team has already made a commitment to doubling our output. Instead of providing lunches 2 days a week, they're now providing lunches 4 days a week. We're going to hit over 10,000 ham sandwiches this year through Brown Bagging. I know you're a little bit hesitant. You're like, should I clap? Is he going to cut me off? What do I do? You did the right thing. You held back. We're going to get there. Christmas wish list. I love Christmas wish lists. I think there's only 13 more weeks till Christmas. And there's a little bit of frost this week. It's just a little sprinkling from the Lord saying, I love you and I'm faithful. I'm ready for it. Last year, 289 families representing more than 1,000 kids didn't just get a present, got prayed for, heard about Jesus. 11 Calgary neighborhoods showed up. The EC team, you all put in more than 1,000 hours of serving, tens of thousands of dollars to make it happen. And listen, our goal this year is ambitious, but we're shooting for 500 families this year at Wish List. I think we can do it. This year, something that we did that was brand new, and we partnered with the Tim Tebow Foundation to host Night to Shine. Night to Shine, some big Night to Shine fans, let's go. It was amazing, bringing faith, hope, and love to those in need, a brighter day to people who are living through their darkest hour. We turned it up in here. You come in sometimes and you think it's, well, okay, I guess we're not that reserved of a church, but like you think church is exciting. You should have been there on Night to Shine Day when we threw a dance party celebration for those in Calgary with different physical disabilities and challenges. We hosted 51 honored guests, 70 caregivers, 145 team members, and your generosity made it possible. And that's not all. Narrow Road. We love the Narrow Road ladies. Narrow Road, come on, ladies, represent. They're providing support and care for women coming out of abusive and difficult situations, addiction, and domestic violence. There's a Narrow Road Freedom Group happening right now. They're leaning in, growing in their faith. We love Emma House. Emma House is a safe and supportive transitional housing space for expectant mothers 12 and up who are coming out of unhealthy situations and at risk of homelessness. Listen, we are unashamedly a pro-life church, but in order to be a pro-life church, you can't just say you're a pro-life church. You got to support moms. And our conviction is that if we can serve a mom, we can save a life. So we love that we've been able to serve Emma House and partner financially. The Dream Center. We got Dream Center grads, residents, and employees that attend EC. Love that Dream Center is helping people get free from addiction, and we can be a part of it, sowing into that ministry. The Mustard Seed is strategic in our city, helping people in need of food and shelter. They're a partner. The Calgary Food Bank is a partner. Listen, we love our city. Cue the applause. You're doing great things in the city. of Calgary. It's incredible. And lastly, but not least, we love our church. And listen, the stronger the church, the stronger the reach. And so as EC has grown, we've been able to grow what we do. And so our focus for EC over the last few years has been expansion and education. So I'll start with a little education update. God has been really faithful. 2 years ago, I stood right here. I know I stood right here because I almost never go to the left side. I always go to my right for some reason, so this is where the really good stuff happens. And I dreamed out loud. I said, hey, what if, just spitballing here, and we just spitballed some dreams together. I said, what if we started a school? What if we started a school, disrupted the private education model, and offered an education solution that would empower next generation leaders with a biblical worldview, biblical values, a quality education, non-woke, involve the parents, kingdom agenda with affordable tuition? You're like, yeah, that's a cool dream. Well, it's been done because of your generosity. Guys, just hold for a second. Because of your legacy living, because of getting your feet wet, saying, yeah, well, we've never started a school as a church before. We'll get our feet wet. We'll have a go. Listen, in the first year, we had 30 students. It was overwhelming. We also have staff that work here, so now they all have to stay upstairs. And even in year one, we'd come down, and it was like this flood of little bodies. And you're like, what is happening here? Well, here's the praise report is we can't even move now. There's 85 students. But listen, don't cheer yet. This is what's even better than 85 students. Year one was fully funded by Legacy. Year two, oh, this is so good. We got provincial funding, so the government is paying for us to protect our kids from them. It's amazing. Like, how great is this? We had a 180% increase in enrollment. Our team, led by Pastor Quincy and Mandy Harriman, have literally pioneered a new model of education in Canada. The Canadian Christian education movement has been studying the hub and lifting them up as a benchmark example of how you can have modified education. There are 50 plus churches from across the country that have reached out and are looking to us as a resource. And the only thing slowing the hub down right now is space. We're just running out of room. That's pretty good. Don't just save it though. On the expansion front, we know, and it is a conviction of ours, that we need to hold our dreams loosely and trust God fully. That's been a real life exercise for us when it comes to campuses. There was a time when EC had 3, we were getting ready to start our 4th, and things changed, and the pandemic and all this. And so a couple of years ago, we began to plan again for campuses, and we were building a team for a North campus, but God had different timing and different plans than we did. And so while we were facing challenges in the North, God was working behind the scenes to prepare a location in the Southwest. Shout out to the Southwest crew. And so God, you can cheer for the Southwest crew. Go ahead, make some noise. And so we moved. I don't think you only get it wrong if you only ignore what God is doing. And I don't feel like we got it wrong. I think we prepped and put things in place that we needed. Then when God opened that Southwest door, we were able to walk right through. What we thought would be North ended up being Southwest. And since April 2024, 66 hands have gone up to give their lives to Jesus. 44 people have made brand new connections. The team is doing an amazing job. New people every Sunday. It's exciting times in the Southwest. This year at Easter, it felt like 2016 all over again, because we thought, what if we rent the Jack Singer for 2 days and try and fill it twice? Not once, let's try and fill it twice. And it was hey, we'll get our feet wet. We've never done it before, but let's have a go. And we did it. 3,835 people came to church. 140 people gave their lives to Christ. In the last 12 months, 1,120 people have given their lives to Jesus. 1,531 brand new connections have been made. 1,817 people have been in a small group. 235 people have been baptized. God is doing something amazing. Go ahead, you can make some noise in our church. It's incredible. But you can feel it today. We got a space issue. And so that just means we got an opportunity. So as we step into vision, as we step into our legacy season, this is my promise. We will continue to live radically generous locally, nationally, and internationally. We're going to take on new initiatives. We're going to see new stories, new miracles. It's going to be amazing. We're going to continue to look for land opportunities. We have not stopped specifically in the Southwest. However, in the next 12 months, our focus is going to be on completing the expansion of this facility here in the Southeast to make room for more people. We've completed phase 1 of our expansion. In February, that cafe atrium space opened up. Not only is it being used as an extended lobby on Sundays, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's now a classroom. On Monday nights, freedom groups meet there. On Tuesday nights, the youth meet there. On Wednesday nights, the young adults meet there. When we build a room, we fill that room. We use it. That's the way it works. We've hosted several. It's become a pretty hot wedding venue, actually. A lot of weddings happening out there. Now it's time for phase 2. Full disclosure, we paused phase 2 because we could not in good conscience invest millions of dollars in an expansion that did not give us more room for Sunday services. So we've been patient, we've designed, we've redesigned, we've reconfigured, and we've designed again. We've come up with a solution that would double our Sunday service capacity, allow the school to grow to 200 plus students with a kindergarten. Can I get an amen? I haven't run that past Mandy, but I'm believing for a kindergarten. It's going to have a full gymnasium, athletic space, more space for our youth, preteen ministries to grow and expand, EC groups. Come on, where are my pickleball people at? We're going to have some pickleball lines on that gym floor. I knew there'd be someone. Listen, EC kids will have a better experience on Sundays. There's a partial rendering going behind me, and we'll show you even more of what that's going to look like over the next couple of weeks. And listen, I'm with you. I'd love to buy up all the properties so we can replace them with grass too, because it looks nice. And maybe we will in the next few years. But I just want to give you a picture of where we're at in the financial progress of this vision. When the expansion vision began, we were looking at a total project cost of $6.8 million. We've paid cash for $1.3 million to cover the atrium and much of the pre-construction needed for phase 2. That's all paid for. That's legacy. You did that. We've worked hard, and due to our due diligence, vetting multiple contractors, working for the best possible price. When we paused this project back in the spring, the price tag on phase 2 was $5.5 million. But now we're moving forward with a new builder, somebody from Experienced Church who's re-engineered, poured time, poured passion, poured resources, is legacy-minded back into the church, and have saved now $1.4 million off the original projection. Not only that, but through the generous contribution of somebody else in the church who's offered their services with a legacy motivation, we're saving another $85,000. Really, this is a miracle because our total cash needed was 6.8. God has miraculously provided 2.8, leaving about $4 million left to complete the project. And what's great is if we keep going, it'll be done in time for school in the fall of 2025, which would be amazing. Yeah, go ahead. That's fine. I'm not gonna try and stop you. Listen, I know what you might be thinking. $4 million. There's part of me that thinks that too. But you know what? As I've been taking it to the Lord, I'd say it's all relative. Because all the water in the Jordan was a lot of water. There was not one person that could step into the Jordan and stop the flow. In fact, if all million Israelites had stepped into the Jordan, they could not have stopped the flow of all that water. But there was a God who knew exactly what the people needed, exactly when they needed it. And if God can stop the Jordan, what can he do in your life? And if God can stop the Jordan River, what can he do in our church? And if God can stop the flow of the Jordan River because he thought now's the time, if he can do that, if God can take a church from nothing 12 years ago to having a global reach with thousands of people coming to Christ, if God can pack the jack multiple times because some people thought we're going to get our feet wet, if we are dedicating babies in this church on the regular that doctors said were impossible, if there are marriages that have been saved and people freed from addiction and shame broken off of lives and insecurity healed, if he can use me and he can use you, if he can stop the Jordan, what can't God do? Okay, there's no limit on the cheers now. You just cheer whenever you feel it's right. So the question in front of us isn't how. It's not how is he going to do it. It's not how will it happen. I think the question is how much are we willing to believe for? And I'm not talking dollar figures here. I'm telling you, I'm willing to believe for my children and my children's children. I'm willing to believe for your neighbor, your son, your daughter, your parent, your coworker. I'm willing to believe for people we haven't even met yet. I'm willing to believe for the people that don't believe what we believe and don't live like we live and don't vote like we vote and don't have our convictions. I'm willing to believe that there could be space for everybody. I'm willing to believe that Calgary is coming to Jesus and we need bigger rooms and bigger faith and bigger steps. If he can stop the Jordan, what's a few $1 million? I'm not sure exactly what legacy step he's going to ask everybody to take. But 1 million people crossed the Jordan River, and their steps looked different, but their direction was the same. As we build for legacy here at Experience Church, our steps might look different, but our direction is the same. There's probably a woman who was 9 months pregnant trying to get across that river, and she no doubt had to take a break every few minutes to catch her breath and keep going. There are probably some young adults who just ran across. Man, I want to get those grapes on the other side, and they just booked it. I bet there were some older people in the crowd who thought, you know what? That older generation, we're going to be steady. We're going to be consistent. We're going to set our pace. We're going to get across. I bet you there was a young family, and mom and dad are just trying to keep the kids from getting too muddy as they're working their way across the Jordan. Listen, legacy building isn't one size fits all, but it is all in the same direction. And so it's obedience in the direction of God's promise, confident in his character. For you, getting your feet wet, it might be that one person gives $500,000. Like, that's crazy. Well, maybe, until somebody writes a check for $500,000. That's not crazy, is it? What if one person getting their feet wet, or what if two people getting their feet wet is $250,000? What if there's 5 people who jump in and say, we'll do 100? What if 25 people do 10? What if 50 do $2,500, or 100 people do $1,000, or 150 people do $500? Or what if 250 people say, I'm going to get my feet wet, it's $200? What if 500 give $50? I'm telling you, if we did that, we'd be halfway there. And in Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 2, Moses gives this charge to the Israelites. He says, hey, your eyes have seen all that the Lord did in Egypt to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to all his land. With your own eyes, you saw those great trials, those signs and great wonders. But to this day, the Lord has not given you a mind that fully understands, or eyes that see, or ears that hear. That is the same, that reminder he's given to the Israelites, I believe is the same reminder God is giving to us today. It goes like this. We have seen God do amazing things. We have walked through, as a community, trials, grief. We've navigated things. We've been there for each other personally, but we've witnessed miracles and the faithfulness and the goodness of God, and there have been signs and wonders. But the promise is you've never heard stories like the stories we're going to hear. You've never seen miracles like the ones that are in waiting. And if he told us, we probably wouldn't believe it. It would be too much. So the challenge is not to fully understand or comprehend all that God has in store. It's just to get your feet wet. Keep moving. If we go back to Joshua just for a moment. In 3 verse 15, it says, the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest. It's at flood stage. What's it like to get your feet wet? Well, the Jordan is overflowing. Flood stage. In 1854, a couple of expert swimmers tried to swim across the Jordan at flood stage, and they got swept downstream. The width, the depth, and the pace of the current would make walking across the Jordan impossible for the Israelites. They could not do it alone. Can I encourage you? That's miracle territory. When what God has put in front of you is more than you can handle, that's miracle territory. When the vision you have is bigger than you, that's miracle territory. When the need that you're facing is greater than your resources, that's miracle territory. And they didn't arrive at the Jordan and analyze it for months. They didn't arrive at the Jordan and have a committee meeting and a brainstorming session about, hey, well, how do we get across? And maybe we should wait for a different season. And maybe the timing's not quite right. And maybe we need a marketing campaign to encourage everybody to get across the Jordan. No. They arrived at the Jordan and got their feet wet. Because faith doesn't depend on a feeling, and faith is not determined by what another person does or does not do. Faith is not even influenced by seasons and circumstances. It would have been easy to take all of those factors into consideration, and if they had, they'd probably still be walking circles in the desert. But instead, they came to the water's edge, and they thought, this time, it's got to be different. And they took a step of obedience in the direction of a promise because they trusted God's character. And it says that the water piled up. I like how it says it in verse 13. It says, as soon as the priests who carried the ark of the Lord of all the earth, sometimes you need that reminder. He's not just the Lord over a few, he's the Lord over all the earth. Everything about your life, he's Lord. Set foot in the Jordan, its water flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. I like that language, stand up in a heap. The water was the obstacle. The water is what stood between them and the promise. But when they stepped, the water stood. When they stepped, I read it like the water stood up and took notice. Like, this is the thing. If you choose to step with us, get your feet wet, live a life of radical faith and obedience in the direction of God's promise, it's not going to be easy. There will be opposition. There will be trials, but we're in it together. There will be complications, but we're in it together. I can assure you, though, that when you step in faith, the devil and all of his schemes stand up and take notice because they're not expecting faith. When we step in faith, the devil's like, wait, he's not supposed to keep going. I thought he was discouraged. When you step towards God, he's going to say, wait, they should have turned around by now. Wait, don't they know there's a flood? Wait, they should have given up. Wait, I thought she was insecure. How is it that she's still stepping? Wait, I thought he was afraid. How is it that he keeps moving forward? Wait, I thought he was caught in addiction. Turns out your struggle does not define your step, and you can keep moving in the direction of a promise. Wait, I thought they were grieving. Wait, I thought they were anxious. Wait, I thought they were overwhelmed. Maybe we are, but we're stepping anyways. He'll take notice. There's power in your steps. And when we take a step of faith, we put the devil on notice that we're not hanging out on the shore anymore. We're not going to go in circles anymore. We're going to get all in. I'm going to get my feet wet. I'm going to move forward. And the water piled up at a place called Adam in the region of Zarethan. Now that is 20 miles from where they crossed over. So think about this with me for just a minute. I don't know how long it takes for water to travel 20 miles downstream. But if where they stepped, as they stepped, the water stopped flowing and it was dry, and God stopped it 20 miles upstream, that has to mean that God stopped the water upstream long before they stepped downstream. Now, what does that mean? That means that God had already put the miracle in motion before they even stepped out in faith. That means that God is already working on what you need before you even know to ask for it. That means that while you're dealing with a diagnosis, healing is already on its way, just waiting for you to step. That means that freedom is on its way, and joy is on its way, and salvation is on its way. He is already working on the solution before we even step. I think that's all good stuff, but my favorite word in this whole passage is yet. Now, the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest. Yet. It's kind of a defiant word. It's like, yeah, there's a flood. I see that situation, I see that circumstance, but yet, it's like, yeah, in spite of that flood, in spite of the circumstance, in spite of the diagnosis, in spite of the situation, and yet, what happened? It did not look good. It did not look possible. It did not even make sense. They were crazy to try, and yet, they still stepped, and yet, it still stopped, and they went across onto the other side. I believe that there are some yet stories to be written in this church. I believe that there are some people right now and you are facing things and believing for things, and to pray again feels daunting, and to believe again feels daunting. But there is a God who stops the flow of the river. There is a God who can provide and yet explanations. Hey, it did not make sense, and yet God still did a miracle. It did not seem possible, and yet here we are. Some of you are in the room today. Your life is a collection of these divine and yet moments, miracles in the waiting that are being released through your faithfulness. So let's get our feet wet together. So what do we do now? I think there's a couple of things. We got to get our feet wet, which the really easy thing, I'm asking everybody to do this today at both locations. We have out in the lobby a board with these legacy cards on it. And there are people in the room today who have filled out cards like this for 12 years and have miracles in their life to show of God's faithfulness. We still have multiple cards from our life hung up. And you know what? Some of them we've seen come to pass. Some of them we're going to write again for the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th year. And yet, who knows? So I'm going to ask you to go into the lobby, take an extra couple minutes here today, grab a card off the board, get a Sharpie, and just write on the back of the card what it is that you're believing for personally. Listen, vision season is not just about what God can do in the church, because what he does in the church starts in the individual. You got to have faith for you. And so write down, hey, I'm believing for. And then when you go to put it back on, you don't take it with you. Instead of putting it back on the board like this, you put it back on the board like this. And every time we see it, we're going to start praying for what it is that you're believing. It's a step of faith, everybody. It's a step of faith to say, hey, I'm going to get my feet wet. This feels risky to be that vulnerable on a card that's going to be hanging there, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to hang it up, and I'm going to believe that out of that step of faith, I'm going to see God come through. He's already working. That's you want to get your feet wet? Let's start there. You want to get your feet wet? Just start asking the Lord, God, make me uncomfortable. God, what is it for me? What is the step? How do I get my feet wet with our EC family and go to the next level in vision and seeing lives change and transform? Begin to ask him that question. Take it to him in prayerful consideration. Before we go today, I would like to take a moment and pray over our rooms, both rooms. I'd like everybody to stand in both locations. Without anybody leaving, I know that y'all are going to rush out to the lobbies and fill out your cards, and that God is speaking to your hearts and stirring things up inside of you right now. But what I want to do is I want to finish today by prophetically declaring what we believe is our I will see vision. Now, this is something that as you listen and receive, I think you're going to see your family in there. I think you're going to see yourself in there. But we're also going to see generations in there. I think it's broad enough and strong enough that it will carry us for 100 years. And it's going to be up on the screen. You can read along with me as we're going and follow along. It's out in the lobby, so it'll be out in the lobby forever. As long as we got lobbies, you're going to be able to find this written on the wall. But would you just posture yourself in a spot where you're just asking the Lord to stir your heart? Can you just do that with me for a moment? Just receive this prophetic promise. I will see is a prophetic cry describing a future not yet realized. It is a vision, a picture, a story that is being written through the faithful sacrifice and dedication of the saints who call Experience Church home. I will see is the mission of those committed to lifting the oppressed, caring for the poor, honoring the widow, and championing the cause of Christ at home and around the world. It is doors open, arms open, hearts open, ready to make space for every story, every life, every prodigal returning to the arms of the Father. It is for everyone. I will see is the heartbeat of the church, unshaken in times of trouble and overflowing with life. The church is God's plan for humanity. We embody the mission of Jesus to seek and save the lost, running full force in the direction of all who need him. I will see is the message of a movement that holds truth and love in equal value. We will preach truth with clarity and conviction, unapologetic because it is the truth that sets people free. We will love fiercely as a testimony and reflection of Christ our namesake. I will see is the resolve to move forward at all costs, not satisfied with the status quo. We will continue to take risks, go all in, and burn the plows. We will buy, we will build, we will break barriers and take territory, expanding at the pace of grace and with the momentum of the Holy Spirit. I will see is the conviction to give faithfully and live radically generous lives. An open heaven comes to those who live open-handed, and everything we have comes from him and is returned to him for his glory and his fame. I will see is the song of a worshiping church, a church who values being together, lifting up our collective voice in praise, offering a sacrifice, and worshiping the Lord. It is a sound of new melodies, new songs, new anthems that usher in the glory of the Lord and turn rooms, homes, auditoriums, and stadiums into sanctuaries. I will see is the call of the creative, innovating, dreaming, daring to push boundaries and think outside the box, setting trends, not following them, divine creativity that brings beauty into the world and testifies to the majesty of our Creator. I will see is the testimony of those knocking on the door of a miracle, the ones not satisfied with normal, who know that a supernatural future belongs to those who never give up. I will see is our belief that heaven is still touching earth, the belief that we will see miracles, we will see cancer disappear, we will see sickness healed, we will see mental health restored, we will see addiction broken, we will see dead raised to life and lives transformed. I will see is a commitment to training, teaching, empowering, and deploying leaders into every sphere of society, infiltrating all levels of culture with kingdom-minded principles and values. I will see is a promise to future generations that we will live now, sacrifice now, and fight now so they can know the fullness of life that Jesus came to offer. It is a bold declaration that our children and our children's children will serve the Lord and build his house. I will see is a dedication to education, prioritizing God's word and worldview to raise young leaders who will grow to love God, love his church, and transform our nation. I will see is the mandate to keep praying impossible prayers, to keep lifting our voices and raising our hands to push back every argument that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. I will see is the battle cry of the warrior, full of strength and resilience, determination and faith, the one who knows that when evil advances, the Lord is my stronghold, the Lord is my salvation. And when enemies rise up and adversity closes in and uncertainty is all around, we remain steadfast because he who called us is faithful. Come on, lift your hands. God, we thank you today that you have promised we will see your goodness in the land of the living, over every heart, over every life, over every home, over every marriage, over every child. God, we're believing that this is the moment.